expand their businesses abroad. And we'll actually talk about this more, how we release a monthly, the monthly trade figures, how we actually capture information on 20,000 different products, physical products that actually leave the United States. All the goods that actually leave the United States, we release information, detailed information that on a monthly basis. We release this information about 30 days after the statistical month. So, for example, with the previous shutdown we just went through, we just released our August data in October. And when you're talking about the government, that's as close to real time as possible. So this information that we provide to U.S. businesses, to other governments, to U.S. resources, to state associations, to trade associations, is again as close to real time as possible, because what it does is it can let companies know, okay, can I be competitive in a foreign market? We release information based on classification codes. So again, all the different products that leave out of the United States have classification codes. And we're going to be talking about that through our presentation today. And what this information can shed a light on is for U.S. businesses to say, hey, I manufacture tables, or I manufacture webcams. I'm considering expanding my market abroad to overseas, and I'd like to ship to, let's say, India. Well, what our data can actually show companies is India a viable market for you? Is India a market which is already saturated with your particular product? So the information that we provide that we'll actually, again, show today is very helpful for U.S. businesses. We also provide information on state exports. So if you want to know what's coming out of Montana, we can provide that information as well, too. So we have a wealth of information that we're going to be providing to you today. And again, just also showing you some of the resources that we have to make things available for you all. Because again, just based on population and statistics, 95% of customers live outside of the United States. So a lot of times companies are looking to expand their business, and to expand, they'll say, okay, I may go into Canada, I may go into Mexico, but again, 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States. So it's a great opportunity to expand, and again, that's what we'll be talking about during this presentation. As I just stated, we are the official source for U.S. export and import statistics, and we are responsible for issuing regulations governing the reporting of all export shipments from the United States. So one of the things that's very interesting is, again, we are the official source. A lot of times people will say, oh, well, I'll get this trade figures from ITA, International Trade Administration, or I'll get this information from the Peers Report. Well, we are the actual official source for the export and import trade statistics, because we are actually capturing that information directly from the U.S. companies as they are ultimately reporting to us. A lot of these other sources, they're receiving information through us. They're also receiving information through certain public records, and then they're creating certain types of programs and approximation, but we are ultimately the official source as we're directly receiving this information from U.S. businesses. So for the next part of the presentation, I just want to give you all a quiz. I actually turned off the webcam, so I can't really see if you guys have your hands up or not. But here's a question. Last year, what was the dollar value in total of goods and services that were exported from the United States? So in a year's time, how much did we actually export? Did we export $500 million? Did we export $1 billion? Did we export $500 billion of goods and services for the entire year?
Fortunately.
I'm trying to pull up the webcam, but I don't want to end up messing up, so I can't see what you guys are doing.
They're picking all of the above.
Okay. Even though all of the above is not an option, let's actually see what the actual answer for that is. We actually exported, so actually even though it's not all of the above, it should actually be D, not listed. The U.S. exported $2.2 trillion in goods and services to 240 markets worldwide last year. Now again, you take a view of that number and say, wow, okay, that's a huge, gigantic number. It's more than the $500 billion that I had listed on the previous slide. But again, we talk so much about how the U.S. is importing from China and all of what we're bringing into China. We are also a one of the major exporters of products, of goods and services around the world. Again, so when we talk about made in the USA, yes, that still does matter, because we can see that last year we exported $2.2 trillion of goods and services around the country, around the world, from the United States. And then another thing that we also find interesting too is when we look at other reports that we issue here from the U.S. Census Bureau, only 3 to 4% of U.S. businesses are actually exporting. Of all the hundreds of thousands of businesses that exist in the United States, only 3 to 4% of those businesses are actually exporting abroad. So when you take a snapshot again of the $2.2 trillion of goods and services that were exported, only 3 to 4% of U.S. businesses are tapping into that giant pie. So again, while we are not a trade facilitation agency, we work very closely with a lot of other agencies. Again, we just want to enlighten companies to, again, the market that is available, to just the economy and just the money that is available when companies ultimately can go global. So again, this is always something that really blows a lot of people's minds. Number one, that Census is involved in exporting, but also just the volume or the value of all the products that we export from the United States. And then the next few slides, we're just going to talk about just some particular areas, exports to China. In 2012, the U.S. exported $110.5 billion in goods to China. And then in particular for your state, in 2012, Montana exported $106 million in goods to China. Between 2008 and 2012, Montana's exports to China grew almost 73%. Now again, this information that we're pulling, that we're actually reporting to you, is information that we publish and that we have and we actually capture that you can ultimately have access to. And Katrina is actually going to be discussing that with a software that we call USA Trade Online. So again, if you want to find out what's Montana doing, how are we being competitive with other states, how are we being competitive in our region in terms of exporting, that's information that we here at the U.S. Census Bureau can provide to you. Now, this next slide talks about exports to Chile. In 2012, the U.S. exported $18.8 billion in goods to Chile. In particular, in Montana, in 2002, we exported $11.3 million in goods to Chile. And again, you'll see between 2008 and 2012, exports to Chile from Montana grew 122%. So again, one of the things that our data will show is how areas are expanding, how areas are growing, and then you can find out how these particular areas are growing from your particular state. So again, a lot of information that we have to provide to you all. And at this point, I'm going to turn the seminar and the presentation over to Katrina Rosen, who's going to talk about our commodity classifications, the data, and then actually show you some of our resources available online.
All right, thanks, Omari. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Katrina Rosen, and I work in the Data Dissemination Branch of the Foreign Trade Division. My office is in charge of disseminating data, which includes the information found in the U.S. International Trade in Goods and Services, also known as the FT900, and also our Internet products, such as USA Trade Online, as Omari briefly mentioned. These are all really great tools which can help us be more knowledgeable about what's going on in our economy and help make decisions in our export process. Before we dive right into all of our different products and services that we offer at the Census Bureau, I want to quickly go over some key information that will make finding and analyzing your data much easier. The first key piece of information to remember about our data is that it's organized into different commodity classifications. The first and most commonly used is the Harmonized System, or HF classification. If you're looking for export information, you would be looking for something called a Schedule B. A Schedule B number is a 10-digit number used in the United States to classify physical goods for export to another country. There's a number for every product in the Schedule B codes, from paper clips to airplanes. So these are what we use at the Census Bureau to publish our U.S. export statistics. We'll talk more about them in a little bit. So now if you're looking for import information, we would use the Classification Harmonized Tariff Schedule, or HTS. This is what we use to classify goods coming in the U.S. The next three classification systems that I'm going to quickly mention are broader than the harmonized system. The first is the North American Industry Classification System, otherwise known as the NAICS. This classification system was developed by statistical agencies in the U.S. and is a production-oriented system rather than commodity-oriented like the HS system. Then we have the Standard International Trade Classification, the SITC system, which was created by the United Nations, mostly used for comparing statistics worldwide. And finally, we have the end-use codes, which are assigned by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. These are for U.S. exported and imported merchandise based on principal use rather than the physical characteristics of the merchandise. So now that you got your quick overview on how our data is classified, I'm going to tell you about our website, which is the key place to finding all the data you need. The web address is www.census.gov/trade. The site contains up-to-date data we release every month, as well as historical data. This also gives you information on signing up for various data products to suit your needs. So you heard me mention something earlier called the FT900. This is what I was referring to, the U.S. International Trade in Goods and Services. This is a 23-page report that we produce every month. Rather than go through every single page of the report, I'll just give you a quick recap of what it is. This is a place to find the latest U.S. export and import statistics, both seasonal and non-seasonal. It also contains historical data for 2 years prior. This is also the place to find commodity-specific statistics by end-use categories, one of the categories I mentioned earlier, as well as selected country and area statistics. Finally, we also publish state trade data in this report for both manufactured and non-manufactured goods with current month and year-to-date values. As you can see, it's a lot of information, but don't worry, I'm going to show you some great places where this information is broken down to help you find what you need even easier. So in the data dissemination branch, we try to help you understand and visualize the trade data. That's why we have included a selection of interactive graphs on our website. You can find graphs like U.S. trade and end use and services, and top trading partners such as China, Mexico, Canada, and so on. We also include a graph of the month, which includes a graph of something in the data that we found interesting or wanted to highlight. This graph is our top trading partners graph for U.S. exports. The great thing about this graph is if you click on a piece of the pie chart, information for the specific country will open. So this is a sample of what the data would look like if you clicked on Canada. It would take you to our country trade data page. Besides the FT900, this is another great place to find data on the website. This area of the web has historical trade data going back as far as 1985. It can help identify data from individual countries, as well as look up trade data by country groupings such as Europe, Africa, or Asia. It also has the ability to look up NAICS data by country and vice versa. Data is available for both import and export, monthly and year-to-date. We also have data groupings by end use and SITC, those groupings that I was talking to you about before. This is an example of NAICS data by 6-digit for China. We can see here data is broken down by the 6-digit NAICS for exports, general imports, and consumption imports, another handy tool for our commodities. I also want to quickly mention where to find our state data. If you're interested in finding out what the top exports or imports are for a certain state, or top country of import-export with the state, this is the place to go. In this part of our website, you can find the top 25 commodities for each state by Schedule B, as well as the top 25 partner trading countries for each state. Here's a sample of the report for the state of Montana. It tells us the top export commodity is coal under HS code 270119, and the value, as well as percentage change, which actually isn't displayed on here over the past few years. It's a really handy quick reference tool. So if you're still looking for other types of data, we also have other statistical releases on our website, such as the FT920, which highlights merchandise trade data. The 920 is the only place that you can get port data besides USA Trade Online. We also publish the U.S. Imports for Consumption of Steel report with preliminary data and the profile of U.S. importing and exporting companies. This is the report that's shown on the screen. It provides us with the percentage of companies trading internationally based on size and industry classification. We really have so much data available on our website. I could spend hours showing you all of our information. I highly recommend checking it out. But since I only have you for a short time, I'm going to show you two of my favorite and most commonly used tools. One is the Schedule B search engine. Remember me telling you that there were 9,000 codes for the Schedule B? This site makes finding your code a whole lot easier. The engine is designed to search the Schedule B commodity book for your specific code. Each 10-digit code represents something specific. You can access the site right on here on a foreign trade website. Looks something like this. So say, for example, we're an exporter and we're interested in finding trade data on, let's say, Christmas ornaments since the season's coming up. Let's walk through finding the code in the search engine. The search will look for whatever phrase is entered in the search engine. So let's type in Christmas ornaments. And let me spell that right. Hit classify. All right. So the search engine is going to ask us questions to try to help us find the right code. In this example, it asks us to tell us more about the ornaments. Are they small objects of personal adornment, architecturally ornament, or are they decorative? Since we're looking for decorative Christmas ornaments, let's select decorative or ornamental article. The search engine is then going to give us some assumptions about the product. If we disagree with any of them, we can use the Modify button located on the right-hand side of the screen. Let's just scroll down and see the codes that it gave us. And voila, it took us to our Schedule B numbers. We can read the description and find the code that works for us. In this case, Christmas ornaments. There are two options here, Christmas ornaments of glass and Christmas ornaments other than glass. Let's say Christmas ornaments other than glass. So we would use Schedule B number 9505102000. It also tells us the unit of quantity, which in this case we don't need, but you'll see in other commodity codes like artificial Christmas trees, there's a number when you would use for filing. All right, so this was an extremely short overview, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned this tool to you as it's really handy. The other tool that I want to mention to you is USA Trade Online. It's our subscription-based online data service. This is a really great tool when you want to find detailed data on a specific commodity or you want to find historical data. The site sort of resembles a giant search engine with the data that is on our website, which can be easily located and customized. So you can look up data by country, district, state, and port, and by HS and NAICS classification system. So let me do a really quick walkthrough of the site for you. First, let's go to USA Trade Online's homepage, usatrade.census.gov. I'm already logged into the site, so I'm just going to click on the link, click here to access the trade data. Or if you weren't signed in, you would hit the Login Now button. You'll also notice that there is a free trial button right below it where you can sign up for a 7-day free trial. You may have also noticed that there is a button to our Schedule B search engine, what we just went to, what I was talking about, as well as many other helpful links. All right, so once we click into the link, it's going to take us to the data source selection page. It's going to give us a couple options to choose from. The first one is the district level data. We have the option to create reports using import or export statistics. They include the standard report, trade by commodity, and country by commodity. This is the section you want to use if you're interested in analyzing 10-digit harmonized system data, the greatest level of commodity detail. Then in the next section, port level data, you can find imports and exports of ports. The data is not quite as detailed as the district data, as in this section the commodities only go up to the 6-digit level, but it can offer different measures such as vessel value and weight, as well as focusing on specific areas of the U.S. Then we have state data, available in both harmonized system and NAICS-based classification system. The origin of movement for export is where the goods began their journey to the port of export, not necessarily where the goods were produced. The state of destination for import is where the goods ultimately ended its journey. And finally, we have NAICS data, both imports and exports. By having both imports and exports on the same report, you can calculate the trade balance. Okay, so since we already found the commodity classification number for Christmas ornaments, let's look up some data for the product. To do this, we first want to click on the exports under standard report. We want to see the highest level of detail in this example. So we're going to want to select the commodity that we want to view. You can select your commodity through the commodity selection screen. You can see it expand all the way to the 10-digit level. Or you can just use the search box and type your commodity code that you got from the Schedule B search engine or a keyword. I'm going to search for Christmas ornaments. Okay, as you can see, a few different codes showed up. Remember, we use the Schedule B search engine to find the exact one we need. However, this is a really helpful tool to find a code quickly, but it does have a limited database. To find your code, the word has to be present in the description, otherwise it won't show up as a search result. So let's select our option. We're going to select Christmas trees other than glass and show report, just to see what a standard report would look like. Okay, so you're probably wondering why there's some blank boxes in some of the fields. This means that there isn't data for the project or 0 was exported. So I'm going to sort my data now in a descending order. Just select this with the arrow pointing down. And this is going to arrange our data from largest to smallest, or vice versa, and also eliminates all the blank fields for us. So looking quickly at our report, it tells us so far this year through August, we've exported a value of $2.8 million worth of Christmas ornaments not made of glass. The data shows that we've also exported close to $400,000 worth of exports to the United Kingdom so far this year, which was the #1 country exports currently. Last year in 2012, there were 489,057, up from 245,465 in 2011. So this is just a really great tool to analyze areas over time quickly or see what the top area of imports and exports are. So that was just a really quick example of a standard report. But let's say I want to customize this data and analyze growth rates. Let's say top growth or changes from year to year. So this is really easy to do and a great comparison tool. To do this, we're going to just go and click on the time. In here, you can manually select years and months. You can select whatever month or year you want to see data for. However, I'm going to skip past this part to calculate the growth. I'm going to go over to the time series tab, and I'm going to uncheck annual because I'm interested in seeing monthly data. And we're going to create a new time series set. Here we can customize certain options for our report. So it lets us create a title. Let's call this year-to-date growth. Okay. Now we have the option of selecting monthly or annual. I'm going to select monthly since we want to see year-to-date growth. We're going to check year-to-date aggregations. And to keep it simple, we want to see year-to-date data from 2009 to 2013. So I'm going to enter 5 in here. In addition to the values, we also want to see growth rate. So we're going to select values and growth rates from the drop-down menus. You can see a couple options of things that you can do to customize your report. And we're going to select first and last periods just to keep the report clean. We're going to hit Create Time Series to save our option. And let's just click Show Report to see what it did. All right, we can see our data now. This is a really great tool because it shows the percentage differences over the years. If we scroll over, we can see that August 2009 to August 2013 year-to-date growth and percentage. Christmas tree ornaments have grown 26% over the past few years and 80.5% alone in the United Kingdom. So it's kind of a neat tool. It does the math calculations for you if you don't want to do it. You can also use this function anywhere in USA Trade Online to see any type of information. So let me switch gears a little bit. Let's say you want to know more about the top exports in Montana at the most detailed level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the main screen. This time I'm going to select state export data, origin of movement, and I'm going to select the HS option. So we're going to see by default that all states over here is checked along with the states. I'm only interested in Montana, so I'm going to clear the dimension here, and I'm going to find Montana in the list. Again, I can either search for it in the list. I'm going to type it in here. Select Montana. So now I'm going to go over to our commodities. We're going to pick which ones we want. Right now, all our commodities are selected at the 2-digit level. I'm going to clear all of these because I'm interested in finding out the highest level of detail, which would be at the 6-digit level. So I'm going to select all of these. This is going to arrange all of our 6-digit level commodities in there. All right, let's click Show Report and see what happens. All right, so again, we have the same thing. We're going to use our arrow, and we're going to drop down to arrange all of our commodities in order. It looks like coal is our top export so far this year, followed by copper oxides at 82.3 million. So we can go through the same process again, adjusting growth rates of states. Possibilities are really endless. At this point, I also want to mention that you have the option to save your report. The benefit of saving your report is that when we update our data every month, you will automatically have the latest data set in it, so you don't have to issue a new report. Same thing when we revise our data every year, all your saved reports will get updated. So to do this, you would just go to File, Save Report As, you can name it whatever you want, and hit OK, and then it'll save it in USA Trade Online. So the possibilities are really endless with the site. I'm only showing you a small portion of what USA Trade Online can really do. As I mentioned earlier, USA Trade Online is a subscription-based product. However, you can sign up for a 7-day free trial right here. It's on our homepage of our website. It also can be accessed for free at any federal depository library. If you do decide to sign up, the subscription costs $25 per week, $75 per month, and a year is $300. So now that you understand our data a little bit better and how you can use our data to find a new market, I'm going to pass it back over to Mari to tell you how to stay compliant when you're ready to export.
Thank you, Katrina. At this point, I'd like to pause. Are there any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. If there are any questions that come up throughout, please just jump in. We'll be able to hear you guys. So Katrina, again, discussed the data and how we can actually use this data and how you all can use this data. Again, it's a great tool for businesses, again, looking to decide how do they want to go abroad if they want to go abroad. That information, again, helps them make informed decisions, and that's the information that we provide to U.S. businesses. Because in many cases, as I stated, just to kind of bring it back, so let's say you're a manufacturer of Christmas ornaments. And you say, hey, you know what, I want to go into the United Kingdom. That's where I want to start selling these products. Well, what our data will show you is, okay, well, that's already a heavy market. That's already a saturated market of Christmas ornaments. So again, our data provides the information, obviously from a statistical perspective, but again, if you're looking to expand abroad and you have a particular product, you export lumber, coal, or whatever, you can find out, okay, where are the areas where I can ultimately be competitive? Where are the emerging markets, the emerging countries where, hey, this might be a new opportunity for me. So now the next few slides, we're going to talk about the basics of exporting compliance. We just talked about the Schedule B product classification. I'm not sure if I mentioned it at the beginning, but there are over 9,000 export classification codes and approximately 18,000 import classification codes that companies use to report either their exports or their imports. And then our search engine is actually on the Schedule B, the export side of the search engine. I'll also talk about the foreign trade regulations, also known as the FTR. I'll talk about reporting your export information in a system which we jointly have with Customs, which is called the Automated Export System. And then I'll talk briefly about the role of a freight forwarder and how they can help facilitate you to exporting abroad. So again, when we talk about the foreign trade regulations, which are found under Title 15 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 30, So here we have all of this information. We have all of this data. U.S. companies are required to report this information to us. And because it is a requirement that they have to report this information to us, we also are required to issue the regulations that specify reporting requirements, specify the value to actually require this information. Because one of the things I don't think we mentioned is, as we release this information on a monthly basis, it is a major economic indicator that the U.S. government uses to determine the health and economy of the United States. So as a result, we have regulations that, again, set forth the requirements, the rules and regulations for, as the slide shows here, for the information that has to be reported in the system. It also has the definition of all the different terms, all the different products. What is a U.S. exporter? How do we define that? How do we define a shipment? How do we define value? What do we expect you as U.S. businesses to report as value? All that information is defined in the foreign trade regulations. And because also, too, we work so very closely with penalty agencies and enforcement agencies such as Customs and Border Protection, Bureau of Industry and Security, there are also penalty provisions which are involved in violating these regulations. So one of the things, too, and I'll actually discuss this later on when we talk about training and some of the outreach and resources that we provide, is this information again. So all 300,000 businesses that are currently exporting, all of them have to adhere to these actual export regulations. And if companies are not aware of them, that's again where we provide outreach, we provide training. Again, Leslie had mentioned earlier that I had spoken at a conference, because that's one of the main goals from the Foreign Trade Division, is to provide information to you all in the trade community, and to also provide this information to state resources as well. Again, it talks about the reporting requirements based on the mode of transportation. So how the goods are leaving the United States will determine how you have to report this information. And then there are some situations where there are exemptions or exclusions. There are certain types of export transactions that you don't have to report. The largest one is if you're exporting goods out of the United States that are under $2,500 per that classification number. So we don't capture everything. We actually have programmers here and math stats here that actually will run an estimate of how many low-value goods are actually leaving the United States. So if you have goods, if you're exporting something valued at $100, do I have to adhere to these foreign trade regulations? Well, no, you don't have to, because we don't require you to report information under $2,500. But again, because we work so closely with other agencies, State Department, Office of Foreign Assets Control, if those are controlled items that you're exporting, then you would fall into the requirements of reporting. So, for example, if you're exporting bullets and they're valued, let's say, I don't know how much a bullet will run you, but let's say you're exporting $10 worth of bullets. Well, bullets are considered controlled items, and they're subject to certain requirements, so you would have to report that. Well, let's say one of your hobbies is, bazooka shooting, and you want to just, export a bazooka. And I don't know how much bazookas cost, but that would be considered a controlled item, which you would then have to report. So again, other useful information that's found in our regulations, we have a sample power of attorney and a written authorization. And then we even have a concordance that just shows you the difference between the existing regulations and the previous regulations if you were more comfortable with that. So we have a lot of useful information in our regulations. Next up, we're talking about the automated export system. So not only do we issue the data, the monthly trade figures, this detailed information for you to know about different products that are leaving the United States, not only do we issue the actual foreign trade regulations which govern how this information has to be reported, what are your requirements as a U.S. exporter, as a forwarder, as a carrier. We also work very closely with Customs, and we developed what is called the automated export system. The automated export system is a cross-agency collaboration between Census, Customs and Border Protection, and other federal agencies to allow exports to be reported to the U.S. government electronically. So just to show the impact of that, AES was developed back in 1994, and it became mandatory in 2008. So let's say early 2000, 2001, we were actually capturing probably about 500,000 paper documents. So before we went electronic, we had something that was called the Shipper's Export Declaration, a yellow document. which companies had to submit to the government before they moved their goods out of the U.S. So at a time, we were capturing, at minimum, 500,000 paper SEDs a month, which means we were capturing 6 million paper documents a year. We actually did a study on those paper documents, and we found that at least 50% of those paper documents had some type of error, some type of mistake, some type of omission, something left out. And again, in a paper environment, it's so much more difficult to go back and correct it, and the process was a lot more cumbersome. With the automated export system, now our compliance rate is only 1%. So again, when we talk about the entire circle of the trade data, if we are now offering a system that gives us improved trade figures, now the trade data that we're releasing will be more accurate. So not only does it ultimately provide U.S. businesses with a way to report this electronically, it also gives us cleaner data, and it gives us more accurate information to provide to you and to provide to the government. This system also improves compliance for the exporting trade community because we have upfront error messages to let you know, hey, you've left off something that's critical to this shipment, and we let you know right up front. The response messages are normally returned within minutes, and again, it reduces reporting burden because once this information is reported to us, other agencies, again, such as Customs, such as State Department, such as Bureau of Industry and Security, they can see that information as well. In the old days, you would have to submit multiple copies of paper documents to the government, and then they would have to be split and then parceled off to different agencies. Now AES, all that information is captured in one location. Now we're going to talk about AES Direct, a free online service which we at the Census Bureau developed in 1999. Again, as we were rolling out the automated export system, some companies said, hey, you know what, this is a little too much for me. I'm just a small company. I don't want to invest a lot in software and vendors, and this is just too much for me. So what we decided to create was what is called the AES Direct system. It is free of charge, and anyone can use the AES Direct. The website is listed here on the screen. It is at aesdirect.census.gov. Being that it is a website, it's available year-round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And again, it allows exporters and forwarders the ability to transmit their information and receive their response messages back from us in the federal government to let you know your shipment's been accepted, you can move your cargo, or you have something that you need to fix. AES Direct is secure, encrypted, and again, it's all paperless because you're actually reporting your information online. So if anyone after this presentation is now considering, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start filing, AES Direct is a great alternative or option for you. A lot of companies also use, whether it be FedEx or UPS, and many of those companies interface into AES Direct, where actually you log into, like, let's say, for example, FedEx in particular. They actually have an interface into AES Direct where you key in your information to ultimately create your shipping order. And this graph here just gives you just a quick representation of how we have grown in AES and grown in electronic reporting. So again, back in 1999, we had 437 companies that were actively using the automated export system. In 2013, we are actually up to 51,000 companies that are ultimately using the automated export system. Actually, as of August, we have 53,000 filers that are actually using the automated export system. So again, it just shows you the growth, how again, starting back in 1994, how we've come along. And again, companies realize, hey, I can do my banking online, I can order stuff from Amazon online, I can get married online, I can find my wife, I'm about to say my husband, I can find my spouse online, you know, so why not have the exporting process be something that's online as well too. So again, in 1999, we had over 600,000 export shipments. So, and again, this just shows you again with the growth of exporting. In 2013, we had 1.3 million shipments, which were ultimately reported into the automated export system. So again, we see the growth in the automated export system, just showing you how technology is growing with exports. But then we also see how the nature of exporting is also growing as well too. And then the graph on the side will also show you that of the 50,000 companies that are actually using the system, 98% of those companies are using the free AES Direct system, while only 2% are using a self-filing system. Now, what's interesting is those 2% actually account for 45% of the value reported through AES, because those tend to be some of your larger companies, and they have their entire system integrated into AES, so their invoicing system, their logistics system. So again, it depends on what is best for your business. Now, the last few slides are just going to talk about our outreach efforts, and again, how what we're doing today in a short order, how we actually, again, provide training to you all, the trade community, just to learn, again, more about best practices and how to make sure you get it right the first time. We have a full-day seminar. It's called the AES Compliance Seminar, which we actually hold in both English and Spanish, depending on where we are. But again, it's a full-day seminar where we discuss the regulations, we discuss classifications, we train you on how you classify your product. We normally have someone local from the Customs and Border Protection area come out and actually do a training, and they talk about different enforcement issues that are going on in their particular area. We have someone from our Bureau of Industry and Security come out and talk about dual-use items, items that have both a civil and a military application to them, how those goods are to be reported. Then we also have someone from the Automated Export System branch talk about how you report in the Automated Export System. And one of the things that we do throughout this program is we also provide best practices. What are some recommendations that we've seen from the trade community? What are some tips that we've seen from and received from you all in the trade community to say, hey, here's what I do in my business. Here's what other companies can do to help them, again, get it right the first time. So that's been a very, very popular program. Actually, we are in Dallas today. We're actually doing a compliance seminar today in Dallas. We're going to be in Savannah in December, and we're going to be in Milwaukee in the middle of December. So again, we're actually working on our 2014 calendar. So again, the information is on our website. Leslie, I'll send this to you. So if you guys are interested in attending a seminar, if we're in your area, I would definitely recommend either you or your team, or definitely other companies who are interested, definitely sign up. Another program that we have for companies is something called the AES Compliance Review Program. We actually reach out to companies that have a lower compliance rate than what they should have. We ultimately sit down, we meet with them, and we really go through their process. What do you do when you get an error? How do you fix this? If you get this mistake, what do you do? And again, we offer them best practices on how to get it right the first time. As you'll see on the screen here, we developed an AES Best Practices Manual based on the Compliance Review Program. Again, we met with high-performing companies, highly compliant companies, and again, we got their recommendations on how do they remain compliant, how do they remain so successful in terms of compliance. And we put together a lot of their recommendations in this Best Practices Manual that is also available on our website. We also provide company training, again, where maybe we'll do a conference call if the company is local here in the D.C. area. We've driven to Philadelphia, driven to parts of Virginia, and we'll just sit down with a company and just give them training on different things that they need more information on. And we also have webinars, which I think we'll discuss more on our next presentation. But as we're doing right now today, this is, in a sense, a webinar where we're accessing and we're using technology to ultimately provide training to people around the country where we don't have the funding to come out to Montana, but I really wanted to come to Montana, because then I could check that off on the states that I visited in the U.S., but that's another story. So we can actually still reach out to you guys and actually provide this type of training to you through technology. Now, another thing that I just want to mention very briefly is the role of a freight forwarder. So again, we're talking about export regulations, we're talking about compliance, we're talking about rules and responsibilities. But you say to yourself, you know what, I'd love to export, I'd love to go expand my business because I can see the real benefits of exporting, but you know what, I make Christmas ornaments. I'm a coal manufacturer. This is what I do. I don't really know about the logistics of exporting. I don't know about all the different requirements. That's where a freight forwarder can assist you. The freight forwarder can help you with your export and shipping documentation. They can help you stay current with the different regulations and the different laws. They can help you get into those foreign countries because they are familiar with some of the import requirements located abroad. They can provide you with the tools and resources to help you identify your shipping costs. How do you classify? Are you exporting to a denied party? So in many cases, and again, they can perform those tasks that an exporter, maybe such as yourself, says, you know what, I just don't really have the resources. Again, I manufacture Christmas ornaments, and that's really what I do. That's what I'm good at. And I just don't know about all these other things. Well, that's where a freight forwarder can ultimately assist you. If you have questions about finding a freight forwarder, agency or an entity that we work very closely with, the National Customs Brokers and Freight Forwarders Association, they actually have a network around the country where you can actually go to their website and you can probably find a forwarder right there in your area that can ultimately assist you. But again, a freight forwarder can help you take that next step to actually go abroad. And again, just closing up with more of the training tools that we have available. On our website, we have about 25 different training videos that we've developed that really cover the entire process, cover a wide range of the process for you in the export environment. We talk about the automated export system. Okay, what's a NAFTA certificate? Again, another government acronym. Okay, what is that? A NAFTA certificate. We talk about that. We talk about the role of a forwarder. We talk about licensing. We talk about regulations. And all of these videos are probably about 5 minutes. I don't think any of them are longer than 10 minutes. So again, it's a great way for you to go online, get some quick information from a short video, again, to learn more about the exporting process. We've already talked about some of the webinars, and actually this image right here in the middle, we just finished a series yesterday called the Go Global Webinar Series. So what we've been pretty much discussing within this hour time frame, we actually developed an entire webinar series focused on helping companies go global. So we actually cover topics on preparing your business to export. How do you find a market? How do you find buyers? What about trade financing? Hey, again, I manufacture Christmas ornaments, but I need financing to help me export. We talked about a wide range of topics. We talked about documentation and shipping. We talked about regulations. So again, it was an 11-part webinar series that, again, I think you would find very, very useful and helpful, and you can find that on our website as well. And then our last tool that we have is the Global Reach blog, where we ultimately put out information to you all, the trade community, again, about different matters that are coming up, different things that we're going to be talking about. Our next blog, which we plan on scheduling today, is going to recap the webinar that we actually conducted yesterday. So it's a great way for us, the government, to reach out to you all, the trade community, and again, just give you information about compliance, about our trade date. It's just a great way for us to reach out to you all on different topics. And we have now reached the end of the presentation. Here's our contact information. If you have any questions, you can dial the 1-800 number, 549-0595, and then you can access the 4 different options. So if you want to learn about AES, the Automated Export System, you can select option number 1. If you want to know more about the site that Katrina was talking about for the commodity classification assistance, you're trying to classify your product, you can select option number 2. If you want to learn about regulation requirements, you can select option number 3. And then if you want to really go more into detail on the data and, okay, I really like that USA Trade Online, I really like that tool, I want to learn more about the exports coming from Montana, maybe the imports coming into Montana, you can select option number 4 to access our data dissemination branch. And then you'll see at the bottom we've got the different email addresses where you can always send us a question if you all have any types of questions. Since you guys didn't ask any questions today, you know, maybe if you are interested in following up with the email, please feel free. So at this point, we're done. Do you guys have any questions or any scenarios that you've come across that you want more information on, or is there anything that we can shed a light on that you all have any questions about. And now I can see you. I put the webcam back on. Now I can see you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess they thought your presentation covered everything, I guess.
Well, and Mari, I just want to make a statement, and for everyone else here, that whenever you contact the census, they usually get back to you within, it's been within hours, sometimes, a day. So I know sometimes you reach out to federal agencies and wonder if you're going to get a response. They're always really good about getting back to you. So.
I thank you very much. I appreciate that. Just to reiterate on that, our leadership here truly values customer service. That's, I think, why we are still able to do the seminars that we do, the outreach, the webinars, because our leadership really says, hey, we want to definitely offer the best type of service. So that I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. So many people say, oh, they're the government and they'll probably call me back in 3 weeks, or they'll never call me back. That is really one of our major mandates here, to really follow up with everyone.
Okay, well, you're going to stay on the phone, right, and listen to Sarah's presentation, and then if they come up with any more questions, they can ask them then? Is that...
Sure thing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Katrina, for helping out with the presentation. And I will go ahead and now unpresent you, Mari.
Okay.
Did everybody get a handout? We'll cover. Basically, I'll just start introducing myself.
Okay.
So.
This is Sarah.
I work for the Department of Commerce. I work with Leslie for the Office of International Trade Relations. And we're here to help Montana companies export abroad. So, if some of what you heard today, you think, gosh, what was that Omari said, feel free, call me at any time. We can reach out to Omari or whoever on their team too. So, but what I wanted to go into a little today is to just kind of cover, I know they talked a lot about our exports, but I just wanted to go into a little more detail about Montana's exports in general, and a couple other presentation slides that I can show you of market research that is available to you too. So, start. I'm going to grab my clicker. That's okay. I'll just okay. I can do the manual version. Here. Okay. So, anyways, as you look at the handouts that I gave you, we have a combined total export. Okay, it goes through. We handle other things besides export training as well, but my focus here is the export training. But we also handle Made in Montana programs, trade show programs. We have a trade office in Japan and assist with protocols for the governor and whatnot. So if you are working with companies or they fall under these categories, let me know. But I'm going to focus right now on kind of the handout that we have. And what I have at the top indicates that we had $2.49 billion in total combined exports. So what that means is that we as the state incorporate bulk wheat exports into the overall total export report. Now this will be different from what Omari's team in the Census Bureau will illustrate, and these numbers here are actually what the Census Bureau reports as well. So, but because bulk wheat exports are such a huge export for the state, in fact, 75% of Montana's bulk wheat is exported, and so indirectly it ships to Northwest grain handling facilities in the Pacific Northwest, and so we can easily track that, eventually then exported abroad from there. So we feel that that's a really distinct commodity that we really need to capture. It's always our #1 export. So when we say combined, that's what it means. But right here, just to kind of confuse you a little more, these numbers strictly are the Census Bureau numbers and figures. And so as you can see, Canada obviously is our #1 export market, has been for a long time, probably will continue to be for various reasons, especially location. Last year alone, we exported $638 million, which was a quarter of all of Montana's total export. So it's a significant market for us. Oftentimes when a new to exporter calls us, it's an easy transition to explore. Language barrier isn't really an issue as much. So with this figure alone, that represented 1.57% of Montana's overall GDP. So it really is a major market for us. We like our neighbors to the north. So the second top market for 2012 was the Republic of Korea, and this has actually been an up-and-coming market for the state of Montana. And in fact, up until 2008, it wasn't even within our top 5. So a lot of those exports are due to coal. We indicate mineral fuel exports, but more specifically, it actually is coal. So that's been a very significant country for us. And then third is China, and as Omari said, it's a significant market for everybody these days, as well as Montana. So it's been holding steady and increasing gradually since 2003. And then the fourth top market for Montana exports in 2012 was Belgium, which the majority of that was actually for pharmaceutical exports. We have a couple of large pharmaceutical companies in Montana, a couple significant diagnostic testing companies in Montana. And all these figures are aggregate totals. So that means that we receive the numbers associated with the commodity, but it doesn't indicate what company is doing the exporting. So we kind of have to use our best educated guess to kind of figure out who's doing what in the state. So, but the key point of Belgium actually is they increased 159% from 11 to 12. So significant jump, somewhat similar to Chile as well. So it's always interesting, it's Canada's a steady market. Lately, China and Korea have been pretty steady. And then after that, it's interesting to see what countries play out from year to year. So okay. Now we're going to focus more on the commodities and products themselves. And these are actually tangible exports. So this doesn't include service exports. It wouldn't include tourism, which technically is a reverse export because of the foreign dollar. So these are actually products that you can tangibly touch. And like I said, bulk wheat is by far the top commodity, and that significant number is $915 million. So it's far above our #1 export. That's why we capture that every year. We work with the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee to track those figures and add them to the rest of our total. So that increased last year alone by $33 million, both because of the gain in value and in bushels. So farmers were happy, the state was happy. So the second top commodity is mineral fuel. And as Katrina, I think, pointed out, coal has become a hot topic for Montana, and we are currently exporting them. Right now, a lot of the coal is going to Korea, some other countries as well. And then refined oil goes up into Canada, and there's a couple large oil refineries that are owned by Canadian outfits. I think that's a lot of where that goes to. So this category alone has probably become a top big player since 2006. So fairly new, larger category, but now it's a significant role in our state. The third category is inorganic chemicals. Well, gosh, what is an inorganic chemical? But silicon is one that we export. A lot of silicon goes into solar panel industry. And then cupric oxide is an anti-fouling agent for marine paint. So a lot of companies that work with large ships, there's actually a company in East Helena that exports a large part of that cupric oxide. So this has been a steady category since 2003, and again, continues to be one of our top. And a large majority of that is exported to China and the Republic of Korea. And the top fourth ranking category for 2012 is industrial machinery. So this has been a steady category since 1996. In 1996, a large majority of that category probably incorporated just that industrial machinery, tractors, that kind of thing. But in 2007, that started to include manufacturing equipment for the semiconductor industry as well, which we have a large company of Flathead that does a lot of exporting. Significant markets include Canada, the Republic of Korea, and Taiwan. And so year to year, for the most part, these will remain pretty steady. There's some up-and-coming growing industries in the agriculture sector and different things too, but as far as the top tangible commodities, that's what you'll find. So, moving along. Again, about our wheat, we exported 117 million bushels to the export facility. What Montana is known for is the high protein content within our wheat, within the Golden Triangle. And so, and I'm not an expert in this, but I know that different types of protein are better for different commodities. So pasta, for example, might like a certain protein level content, and then baked goods like another type of protein content. So because our wheat has such a high protein content, it's mixed in with other states' wheat that has less protein level content, hard to say, and then it's mixed in at these Northwest grain handling facilities and then exported from there. So it's pretty an interesting, significant industry for Montana, for agriculture in general. And Japan, out of that 117 million bushels, Japan usually purchases about 50%. So roughly that's about 60 million bushels each year going to Japan. A lot of that obviously goes into the pasta. There's a Japanese-owned pasta manufacturer outside of Great Falls. They are in Great Falls because they wanted to be at the source of our wheat. So other markets include other countries in Asia, Taiwan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Indonesia. So it's a significant commodity, and hopefully I haven't paid too much attention, but I think the prices and the outlook for it looks relatively stable for this year too. So this is a brief overview of the overall total for Montana exports from 1999 to 2012. And the blue indicates the tangible goods, and then the red indicates the bulk grains, the bulk wheat. And as you can see, in 2003 here, there was a steady incline of exports up until 2008, and everybody probably knows what happened after that. So we were hit by the market crisis. However, since that, we've been increasing, and since 2011 and 12, we've had 2 record years. I'll show you a brief example of where we are for August of 2013. It looks fairly, resembles 2012 figures somewhat, so we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball quite yet, but hopefully it should be a good outlook for our overall exports for 2013. And then I wanted to briefly show you, because Canada is such a big market for Montana, our exports to Canada are, it actually, from my previous slide, it simulates that as well. So again, from 2003 on, we steadily increased until 2008, market crisis, and then we've been increasing ever since to hit 638 million in 2012. And what is it that we're shipping to Canada? Well, the petroleum and coal products. So, and this is by NAICS, and again, Omari had indicated the North American Industrial Classification System, which is by industry sector. And so petroleum and coal products, these are kind of more of the refined oils, so largely due to probably the Canadian-owned refineries. Motor vehicles, this is always kind of an interesting category. That actually, we believe, is personal vehicles, and depending on where the exchange rate is, I've heard that sometimes if it benefits the Canadian citizens, they'll purchase cars here, maybe export them, and whatever. So it's always a top category. That also includes RVs, different things like that. And then here we have cement and concrete products, agricultural machinery, and industrial machinery. And I do believe a lot of that is due to the agriculture industry, but I also think it's partly due to the oil sands as well. So those have been a great categories that have been holding steady. And then from there we have grain and agriculture products here. These have been up and coming export products. They've been increasing each year, and it's really good to see that for the agriculture industry. Here we have plywood, engineered construction products, oil and gas, engines and turbines. So kind of a mix, and then here we have just kind of a catch-all for everything else as well. So overall, this is kind of what it looks like for the most part for year to Canada. And again, it's a good neighbor to have.
I have a question.
Sure. Yeah.
I was in Home Depot when we applied it a while back, and I talked with one of the guys. He said that 75% of Home Depot sales in that area go to Canada. Is that included in those figures, or are those just people taking stuff home?
Those, it depends on how much they're purchasing. If that's personal consumption, and so it's not technically a what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a commercial export. So the reporting requirements will be different only up until a certain threshold. And Omari, feel free to jump in if you need. But as a personal consumption, you're allowed so much when you cross back into the border. So depending on what the amount is that the individual purchasing, that might not be reported. So for the most part, I believe that this is more of Montana companies that are shipping, exporting a commercial export up into Canada. I could be wrong because there's actually a lot of, within the northwest region of Montana, there's a lot of Canadians that come down tourism for, we've had a lot of, even a small pasta manufacturer that said, well, we get Canadians that purchase our products all the time. I think this is going to be a really good market for us. So, you will see that, and I don't remember what the exact threshold is for a personal consumption once you get to the border.
So from a data processing point of view, if you're Canadian, you went to Great Falls, you bought a bunch of stuff, and then you didn't put anything on your customs form, then it wouldn't show up in this, but
correct.
if you did,
correct.
it would.
Now, technically, from a customs standpoint, they're going to want you to report whatever it is.
Right. I'm just simply saying that if you didn't write anything down.
Exactly. And, the $2,500 threshold for reporting requirements is where, like, the Census Bureau requires that any export shipment that is $2,500 or more has to be reported. So those smaller shipments won't technically be reported. So, but it does capture most commercial shipments, I would say. So, and with this, I just wanted to work with the Wiser Trade, and I'm just going to show you an example. Wiser Trade receives all of their U.S. import and export data from the U.S. Census Bureau. And then we also worked with the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee and the National Agricultural Statistics Center to incorporate the bulk figures. And then we work with our friends here at TIC and ourselves to put together the state export report, which usually comes out in the spring of each year. So at this point, because you guys are all data users, I want to show you, and for questions, I have a business card too, but feel free if you guys are working with a company or you just have more questions afterwards to contact me at any time. But at this point, I do want to pull up. A couple examples of, this is our Wiser Trade data. And so again, sorry, I cannot talk and type at the same time. So the export and import data for the U.S. is going to be exactly similar to what the U.S. Census Bureau has. It's fairly similar to what the USA Trade Online illustration is as well. And this is where we will drive all of our export numbers. We also can do a variety of things And so if you guys have questions or you're working on a project, let me know. We can help in any way we can. But a quick example of over here on the side, I'm sure it's probably hard for everybody to see, but this includes the U.S. database, but then we also have Canada, Chile, Colombia, EU, China, Japan, and a wider world. So what we can do also is, as a good starting point for market research for exporters, is to look at the data, analyze what markets are possibly saturated, use this as a roadmap of how you want to move forward. But then also with this, you can go into these other, let's say, Chile is a great market for you. So then you can see who your competitors are, what Chile's importing. So you kind of have an understanding of, wow, well, maybe actually China's already in this market as well. So it gives you kind of a detailed analyzation with statistics of what you should look at and where your products are currently going. So for this example, though, since we're kind of focusing on Montana exports, again, we can go by HS numbers, which are the commodity classification, or the NAICS, which is more the industrial classification system. But I just want to show you really quickly where Montana is year-to-date as of August 2013 with our total exports to partner countries. So I'm going to show this quickly, and it's hard for you to see. I'll try to pull this up. And like I said, we are pretty close to where we were a year ago, August 2012. We're down by 3%, but at August to December, anything can happen. So we'll see where we're at after that. But as you can see, Canada is our #1 market. Again, the Republic of Korea, Switzerland. Switzerland in the past, I need to look into this, but we have exported some coal to Switzerland, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's under that country exports. China's #4, Taiwan's #5. So somewhat similar to where we've been exporting. And like I said, we're 3% down from August 2012, which is actually pretty good. Anything can happen up from now until then. So that's an example of that. I just want to briefly pull in, as Amari said, the U.S. is one of the largest exporters in the world, and this will illustrate, this is under our wider world totals, and so this is all reporting countries, and I would like to illustrate how the U.S. is actually the #1 according to year-to-date. These figures, which I'll be right here, the U.S. is the #1 exporter in the world. Following very closely behind us is obviously China, Germany, and the Netherlands, and then the UK. So, there's, as Katrina indicated, there's so many different variables, and you can look at so much information, and it's really helpful for whether you're doing market research for a company. Sometimes we have statisticians from the university system contact us. There's just a variety of different methods and topics and everything that you could ever imagine to help with whatever your project might be. So, and again, here you could look at Colombia's imports and exports and a variety of tools. So with that, I also want to jump over the Montana Department of Commerce Census and Economic Information Center, i.e. ESLI, has worked with me, and we put together a really nice geographical map of Montana's exports. So when you go to their homepage, you want to go to Maps, and then they have featured maps. And once it comes up here, this is data that shows all of Montana's exports to partner countries. And what's really great is, you can pull your cursor over a particular country, And for example, here's Canada. It shows the total exports for 2012. And then it lists everything by NAICS categories, so petroleum and coal products are number one. But then also, if you're doing research, as you pull down, it'll have all the historical data from 2002 moving forward. So for a 10-year period, and it's actually, it's just a fun interactive map. There's a variety of different things to look at. Here, let's pull up, this is China. So, again, basic chemicals are our top exports there, and then it gives us our total. And interesting enough, in 2002, we exported 5 million in total exports, and in 2012 we were up to 105 million. So, it's a fun, interactive way to explore any type of export data that we have available. This actually will be updated as new figures come out, and as Omari said, this is by year. So this data that the Census Bureau puts out is on a monthly basis. So this will be updated once those final figures are out, which is sometime in the spring. So anyways, there's a lot of, yes, please.
I work for Plum Creek over
Right.
the project. Our corporate headquarters in Washington. We're exporting trees out of Oregon to China. Which state gets credit for that?
I would think whoever's filling out that export report that Omari was talking about with the AES, that kind of thing, my guess is probably Oregon. And as that's a good example, because that brings us back to the bulk wheat example. If we were to work with Omari's team and look at all the bulk wheat exports, technically Oregon and Washington are getting according to the Census Bureau, they're getting all the credit for the bulk wheat. And so your example is kind of exactly what's called an indirect export. And unfortunately, it's difficult to track indirect exports, unlike we can with the bulk wheat. Bulk wheat is shipped to one location. We know when it's shipped to this location, it's being exported, we're good to go. Cattle industry, lumber industry, oftentimes if it's processed somewhere else, after it's processed, that particular state probably is the one that's filling out the export report, and then that state's getting credit for it. So it's a really good example of how the industry works, and with certain products that are moved out of state before they're shipped to other locations, Montana might not always get the credit for it. That's okay. Go ahead, Maury.
If you wouldn't mind if I jump in, the way we actually calculate ours is based on state of where it's beginning its journey to the port of export. We require in the regulations, so in a situation like that, if the goods were manufactured in Montana or built or grown in Montana, and then their journey to the port of export from Montana, then Montana would be shown as the state of origin. Washington would not be shown as the state of origin if the company is reporting that correctly. So that's how we define the address in our regulations.
Perfect.
To answer your question.
That helps. But I know that you probably contribute to a lot of that Canadian, market segment and whatnot too. So that was interesting. So, does anyone else have any other questions? Had it a little early. So if anyone wants to play around with these interactive maps, feel free. So, do you guys have questions for Omari or Sarah? Anything else?
Well, I have one you showed on the same example of Canada there, the amount for last year, and then you showed 10 years of history. Is there any way to look at how the trends are changing for each of those segments over the last 10 years?
For sure, yes. You can look.
How would I do that?
You could do that in a couple of different ways. You could reach out to myself and we could work together and pull up this, because the examples that we illustrated are really kind of a broad spectrum overview. When you kind of look and drill down into a certain market, you really can start to see the different trends over time. And I think Katrina might have said, I can't remember, if they go back to 1996 or something. I mean, we can look over a 10-year period for sure. And once you analyze that, you can really see wow, what is this trend for this commodity, or where, what's up and coming, and
Right.
And like I said, there's a couple different agriculture sectors that have been increasing quite steadily, and so yes, let me know.
I need to contact you to do that.
If you want. There's other sources available, and I didn't write.
Isn't it kind of the tools that Katrina showed and
Correct.
showed? That's where you get the data. That's where we got them data for the map, but we just use the tools.
And so, like Katrina's, their data, you can get the free subscription for 7 days. We already have the state subscribed to, so you as a state citizen can contact me, and we can work together. There's other sources out there, and I can provide you a link of that.
Great.
That's, I believe free of charge. Isn't that right, Omari?
Hold on for a quick second. We actually have a comment on that.
Okay.
So I heard that the question was about getting historical data potentially going back 10 years, and we definitely have that available on the tool that Katrina showed you on USA Trade Online. As well, if you were having issues with that, she already mentioned that you could get a free 7-day trial, but if you wanted help just navigating this site, you can feel free to call our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-549-0595. And you would want to select option 4, and then of course you can email us at ftd.data.dissemination@census.gov.
Perfect.
What libraries in Montana is that data available?
Excuse me?
She had said that that data was available at certain types of libraries, or any of those libraries in Montana.
Yeah. Could you reiterate again what you mentioned about the public libraries, where all this information is disseminated from again?
Right, they're available specifically at federal depository libraries. They usually have at least a station or two computer stations that you could access this data for free. You just want to make sure that you know that your library is a federal depository library, which I don't know the site for them off the top of my head, but if you just type into Google federal depository libraries, it's the first thing that comes up, and they have a map that you can search for libraries in your particular area.
Okay. I'm not too familiar with I would like to say that the state library.
It tends to be a lot of university libraries.
Oh, okay.
Large public libraries tend to be federal depository libraries.
And if any of you here are, kind of wanting more information on resources, exporting in general, we have a basic guide to exporting book that's free of charge. So if anyone here wants that, let me know. I'll run downstairs to grab that. And it covers everything from the export reporting process, available to how you price your product, that kind of thing. So it's more for the actual hands-on exporter, but if anyone wants that, let me know. So I have to run down here.
There are 12 libraries in Montana, and most of them, they're all at universities.
Interesting.
And the state law library.
Is there any in Helena?
State law library.
State law library has it. Montana Tech, Fort Belknap, U of M, Carroll. Carroll has one.
Oh, Carol.
Great.
And it might be possible, I don't know for sure, but a lot of things you can get through interlibrary loans, if you know exactly what you want, the library might be able to get it from
Right? So a variety of different ways, if you get lost and you forget how we use. Yeah. You went off. So, any other questions? No? Well, I just wanted to thank Omari and the Census Bureau team. That was a fabulous presentation, and we'd love to have you in the future anytime you want to come out. So
If you need to check Montana off, let us know.
So
Yes, thank you very much.
cool. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And then we are going to take a break real quick. And Omari, you guys are going to leave us, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Have a wonderful
All right.
day. Thank you so
All right,
much.
you too.
for your
Thank
help.
you.
Okay, so welcome back, guys. Next off, we're going to have Jim, who is also with the census, and he was able to get enough funding to be able to come out here, although it was a little tricky. Just to let you know, like the day that they went back to work, I called him. He's like, I already booked my ticket. So he came last year. He's going to talk for about 30 minutes, and I will go ahead and just let Jim take over.
Thanks, Leslie. My name is Jim Castaneri. I'm a geographer from the Denver office of the Census Bureau. I'm going to take some time today to talk about some new developments in census data and GIS. But I want to preface that first by saying, as a geographer, I deal a lot with desktop GIS, some with web-based GIS. But what I'm talking about today is a little bit above my head most of the time. So the perspective I'll be giving you is that from a layperson and what the potential I see for the future. I want to do a couple of little demonstrations of a new product called TigerWeb and show you a little bit about the Census API. So let's see how this goes. And maybe I'll use this guy. Maybe I won't. So, traditionally speaking, when you have a desktop GIS and you want to integrate data with that desktop GIS, you have two sources of data that you need to worry about. Your geographic data in your GIS data, your demographic data in your GIS data. In the past, if you were doing some kind of demographic analysis, you had to manipulate those data sets separately and then join them with your desktop system. That was often a frustrating process, which I demonstrated yesterday, if any of you attended the workshop we did on merging census data with Tiger data inside desktop GIS. Really, today, in a nutshell, what this presentation really is about the fact that that process, I believe, is going away. Because of some new developments in web-based technologies, I think the future holds a brighter future for those of us who practice GIS. So let's see how many different buttons I can use to make the presentation today. So what's changed? Well, most significantly perhaps, and most of you, well, how many of you are GIS users? A lot of you, okay. How many of you have used web maps? If you're not a GIS user, you use web maps. It's pretty common these days with Google Maps and MapQuest and Microsoft Bing and all of that. A lot of those technologies are based on what's referred to as web mapping services, or a WMS. And if you're in the field of GIS, you know that web mapping services are based on a standard established by the Open Geospatial Consortium. And they sat down a number of years ago and said, there's this new technology out there that people have been working on, namely ESRI and others, who put webs on map on the web, and they've come up with ways of making that work. It's now a standard, and you can actually publish different types of maps on the internet using a variety of different tools, and as long as you adhere to the OGC standard, then your product can be consumed by a variety of different software packages. One of the most powerful aspects of WMS is its ability to be read by a web browser. So Internet Explorer or Firefox can read a mapping service. And a good example of a web mapping service is Google Maps. MapQuest is another one. But other federal agencies also have them. USGS has its own web mapping service. The Forest Service has it, BLM has it. Many state governments, such as the state of Montana, they also have web mapping services that are available to the public. There's a product that we'll be demonstrating today called TigerWeb, a census web mapping service that allows you to look at our Tiger data online in context. So if you're interested in the types of features that the Census Bureau tracks in our digital mapping database, Tiger Web is a tool to allow you to see those map features. The important thing about a web mapping service is that the WMS is generated on the server side. The client has very little work to do to display a web mapping service. In fact, and I may be getting a bit ahead of myself here, a web mapping service is nothing but a bunch of little tiles, little pictures. And if you think of a ceramic tile floor, there are little tiles pre-established on the server that have pictures of the layer that you're interested in. And when you request a map, literally what the server does is send you little pieces of that map in the form of tiles for the zoom area that you're asking for. Now, if they're concerned about performance, they'll pre-cache those tiles, those little pictures ahead of time. So there are set scales for all of the maps. All of that information is set up front, cached, so that when you, in the case of Google Maps, for example, when you request a map of your town or your home, that information has been stored in a cache and it can come to you very quickly. And that's the beauty of a web mapping service. Similar to a web mapping service, but much more powerful, is a web feature service. Again, a WFS is established under the standards of the OpenGIS Consortium. And if you are a GIS user, a web feature service allows you to ingest over the internet actual primitives for the geographies in question. So the lines and the areas and the points that make up a map can be provided to you through a web feature service. Not only can it allow you to display the data, but you could also edit the data. And that's one of the more powerful functions of a web feature service. And we see a great potential for Tiger Web in the future for a web feature service. Right now, Tiger Web is only a web mapping service, not a WFS. So I'm at that stage in life where sometimes I need glasses and sometimes I don't. If I look there, I'm fine, right? Did I go backwards? No. Okay. So what else has changed? If you're familiar with census and census mapping technology, you've heard the term Tiger and Tiger line files. We have been releasing Tiger line files for over 20 years. And as a geographer doing GIS, that was a significant thing. Tiger being a digital map, if you will, in its most basic sense, really transfigured, what's my word here? Transformed, thank you. Yesterday was a very interesting day. It transformed the environment of GIS. Before Tiger came along, a lot of states and counties were building their own mapping systems, but there was no seamless extent to that data. The census came along in cooperation with USGS and built Tiger, a nationwide mapping system. It's really a statistical mapping system, so it's great for looking at the various data that are associated with Tiger that comes from the Census Bureau. So we got Tiger line files that came out. You had to have software to ingest them into your desktop or your workstation. And then the Census Bureau said, oh, you know, everybody's using software that uses shape files, so why don't we just stop making Tiger line files that are text readable and very hard to process, also quite large. Let's start issuing shape files. And a shape file is no longer a proprietary format, but an Esri designed format for GIS data. And also the geodatabase is the same thing. And we actually decided, oh, geodatabases are kind of a nice thing to have too. So just in the last year, we've also provided select Tiger data in geodatabase format. Again, these are Esri standards. That's in industry, we say Esri, ESRI. A big GIS company out of Redlands, California, like the Microsoft of the world. So we started offering this data 20 years ago. It was on CD-ROM first,
and then we put it up on the web, and now we're doing shapefiles and geodatabases. And within the last year, we've also put some shapefiles and geodatabases up there that contain a wee bit of the SF1 and the ACS 5-year data. What's SF1? That stands for Summary File 1, which is select data sets from the decennial census, the 10-year census that last occurred in 2010. And then the ACS 5-year data, that's the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey publishes a wide variety of data variables and a couple of different time spans, 1-year data, 3-year data, and 5-year data. So the 5-year data is what's being offered as pre-joined on our website with Tiger. It's not the only source of the data, and you probably are aware of that. It's important to note that the geodatabases contain metadata tables for the data that are inside there. And if you have worked with census demographic data, particularly the ACS, you know that finding out what a field name is and the definition of that can be a real pain in the neck. So it's nice that those geodatabases have metadata tables. There's one geodatabase in there that's got a geodatabase for each state that contains population and housing data to the block level. And if you're working at redistricting for the state, or look at rejiggering your school districts or your fire districts and those kinds of things, that data set would be real helpful for you. So I'm glossing over a lot of this stuff pretty quickly, looking at the clock not quite quickly enough. There's a lot to say here, but let's get to some of the nitty-gritty. The API is a new release also in about the last year or so from the Census Bureau. API stands for Application Programming Interface. This is a series of tools, I'll put it that way, that reside on the Census Bureau servers that will reply to you if you send it the right kind of request. And if you're a programmer, I know some of you are developers out there, even though you won't admit to it, you really can send a specialized request to the Census Bureau server, and it'll respond with some specific information back to you. This is pretty cool, and I'm going to give you an example of that here in a minute. And those of you who play around in desktop systems where you process data, you'll start to see some real power in the new Census API. So Tiger Web, there was a little history there. I talked about it. The Tiger Lion files. Really, Tiger Web is the next evolution from a long progeny of Tiger-based files. Talked about Tiger Lion files, the shape files, geodatabases. Tiger Web is that next evolution. If you just need to see the Tiger data, and you don't really need to ingest it into your desktop, you can do that with Tiger Web, and we're going to show you an application in a second here. So this is our Tiger Web main page, and you can find it at tigerweb.geo.census.gov, and I've got the URL on here. Next, did I have it? Yeah, I had it right there, tigerweb.geo.census.gov. If any of you have that laptop there in front of you and want to check it out, that's where you go. So this is what the page looks like when you get there. I'll take just a minute to point some things out. These tabs along here describe different aspects of what Tiger Web is and how you can use it. We have the web mapping service here under the WMS tab, then the REST services. And REST is representative state transfer, and it's a relatively new way of having a server return very specific data elements to you based on criteria that you establish up front. And I want to demonstrate that to you. Under the data files, there are different descriptions to what is included in Tiger Web, and then the geographies in Tiger Web, and a contact us. There are two different versions here, and I'm going to point to it here, although it's not live. Tiger Web is the current version of Tiger Web, and we update it about twice a year using the most current geography at the Census Bureau. Tiger Web 2010 is the census version of all those geographies. So if you want to know what the place boundary for Helena looked like on Census Day, that would be the place to go to see that. So as I mentioned, it utilizes the REST protocol, and basically, you know, it's hard for me to explain what it is when I don't understand it very well myself, but demonstrating it, I think we'll all understand it a little bit better. There's a separate URL. If you know what a URL is, it's a universal resource locator. In the days of the internet, we are always typing http://www. Well, that's the URL, right? For Tiger Web, there's a separate address for each service that we offer, and there are several dozen of them. There's a service for census plots. There's a service for places. There's a service for census tracts. There's a service for hydrography, and on and on and on. And each one of those themes or layers in the talk of mappers has a unique URL to it. And if you send the right request to that URL, you'll get a map back. You can ingest Tiger Web with your browser, and I'll show you that too. You can ingest it with a client, such as Gaia, and that's a open source software tool. I don't know what the acronym stands for at the moment. Even Google Earth will consume a web mapping service. A lot of people don't know that, but if you're a Google Earth user and you haven't checked it out, it does pretty cool with web mapping services. And of course, desktop GIS will ingest a web mapping service. And just about everybody who's anybody that creates map products in the United States has a web mapping service with some kind of data associated with it. So let's have a look at Tiger Web real quickly. This version of Tiger Web uses a Silverlight plugin, a Microsoft Silverlight. There are lots of different ways you can use a mapping tool. You can use JavaScript. Silverlight's another one. There is, what's that other one? Escapes me at the moment.
Flash.
Flash, thank you. So what you got here is inside your web browser is a map. And this is not new to most of you, I'm sure, because you've seen these things before. Yet the technology behind it is only maybe 3 years old, with Silverlight being in the picture. So what I've got is a little layer of legend that pops up here. And even though we're only worried about the United States, Tiger Web pops open showing the entire world. And with a little roll of my mouse button, I can zoom in. I can click on this tool here and zoom in. Again, you probably have seen this before in other places. Esri is one company that implements the software, and we're actually using Esri software to do this. There are other software packages that will do the same kinds of things. There are even open source tools that will allow you to publish maps like this online. Open source meaning free with the code available. With this map layer legend, I can turn things on and off. It is scale dependent, meaning how far you're zoomed in or out will determine what you can and cannot see. So if you're trying to show census tracts and you click them and turn them on, you see the little way go, well, nothing happened. It doesn't work. You're not at the right scale. So zoom in, and I'm really addicted to the mouse wheel, so I kind of have to have that mouse in hand for me to use it. You'll start to see some different things show up, and you have to be in the right county. The tracts require a minimum 2,400 people before you'll start to see the boundary. And there we go. I just wanted to show a tract number there. So that looks like Bozeman, huh? So you see the little tract numbers there, 1.02, 1.01. Those are census tracts. I can turn that off, and at this scale, they'll disappear right away. I can turn on transportation, and this is all based on Tiger data. Everything you see, except for the shaded relief, is coming out of Tiger. So if I want to ingest this stuff, I can, using my own application at home. So this is the viewer that we have, Tiger Web Viewer. And I can't spend much more time on this because I have more to cover. I'm just going to close current tab. I want to talk with you about some other tools.
Quick question, Joe.
Yes, sir.
In the past, Tiger data has not been lined up as well as we like the layers we've had. Has there been improvements for that?
There has been some improvement. And, you know, when we were talking back in the back room here earlier this morning, Montana has probably the best track record of any state in the country when it comes to homegrown GIS. I don't mean to imply that because it's homegrown, it's not sophisticated. It really is one of the most sophisticated data sets in the country. And census, quite frankly, has had a hard time catching up with what Montana's been doing. A lot of great initiatives here at the state boundaries, cadastral layer, addresses, and we recognize that work that's being done, and we are trying to work with Aaron and others at the state. We've had some success. Over the last 15 years, it's improved quite a bit, but you will still find some inconsistencies in places. And it has to do with our topological requirements in Tiger. We have a lot of relationships between aerial and linear features that say this particular drainage ditch is also relevant to voter district such and such. And in Tiger, everything is integrated as a single layer. We don't have separate layers. So when you make one change to one feature, it has a topological rule that requires another change to another feature. And that's a somewhat lengthy explanation of why it's very difficult for us to use individual layers from local governments, because we have to adjudicate differences when it gets integrated into Tiger. We hope, though, to provide a continuous process to the state of Montana and others whereby we can continue to receive those updates and Tiger can be improved continuously. That's our goal. I mentioned another software development, and this isn't outside of my realm as a geographer, so I'm quickly getting out of my comfort zone. The Census API is a really neat new development, in my opinion, for data users, demographic data users. So this is all about demographics. It's not about Tiger or mapping at all. It's all about the data. And being kind of a data nerd, I went to that website and I found out that to use it, you have to sign up for an API key. So it's this big old long string of characters that identifies you as a user. So if you want to use this, you've got to sign up for it. It's free, but they'll send you the key and then you start using it when you start playing around with things. Right now, the API provides live access to select SF and ACS tables. You've heard me use that before, so summary file and ACS. When I say select, it's a pretty good percentage of those two data sets are available through that API. It utilizes that REST protocol, and in my opinion, this is really the future for GIS data users. As we continue to expand the Census API, you'll see more and more variables from the census available through the API. And I really think, you know, this manual process that I talked about yesterday is a bygone era. I think soon there'll be so many tools out there available to leverage that API. You'll simply click a few buttons in your desktop GIS, and the variables you want will be brought to you in real time. So I'm going to give you a demo about that now. I should know that one happens still. Where was that HTML file?
I think if you just do IE down in the corner, isn't it?
This one here? Yeah. Okay. So, you know, I'm a nerd, not a hacker and not a programmer, but playing around enough with the tools that they provide you, one can put together a few things to play around with what the API does. So in order for that API to work, you have to send us some very specific requests. All of this is documented on that developer website. But I wanted to show you this because it really, by using this, you can see exactly what string it is you send to the server and get a real feel for how it works. So I'm going to go back and describe more of this in a minute, but let's run through it real quickly. I want to choose some 2011 5-year ACS data, and I threw some variables up here that I thought would be usable. Okay. So the part that I want you to look at right now is down here. And I'm going to explain this string for just a second, if I can, without getting in the way. So you see the HTTP api.census.gov/data. That's the parent URL. That's the location of the API. The rest of that long string are the criteria elements that give the server side the information it needs to return information to you. So this little flash here says I'm accessing 2011 data. Then I have a variable called ACS5, 5-year ACS data, and then there's my key that I applied for. Even though I'm an employee, I still need a key. That big old long string all the way to this ampersand is just says this is Jim using the system. And then the actual command here. I want this variable, B08301_001E, that's the estimate, and I want this variable, E, another estimate. And it turns out I had looked this stuff up before and made myself a list. I want means of transportation to work total, and then I want those that got to work via bicycle. Now, if I'm doing analysis, why might I have chosen those two? Because I want to normalize the data. I want to be able to see what percentage of cyclists there are for a particular area. Once I generate this long string, the last thing I do in my URL is say, what geography do I want? So it's really quite simple. All I'm saying is I want these two variables. I have to know what those variables are up front. So I've got to go into the documentation and say, I know what B08301 means. And if you know that, there's a table that we provide that you can look every variable up. It's a spreadsheet. You know ahead of time, you could simply build a lookup tool like I did here and say, put all 9,000 plus variables as a lookup tool. And you could search by keyword or whatever you want and pull up your variables and let the user select which ones you want. And then you add them to the list, and it's separated by commas. So I want this variable, comma, and this variable. And then I want it for all counties in the United States. So that's all I've said right here. I said, I'm Jim. I want this variable and that variable for all counties in the United States. So if I send that, if I post that request to the server, it's going to ask me, I want to open it. And I'm going to open it using Internet Explorer. This is what the result looks like. So it's a text formatted file. It contains a header. And yesterday we talked about that as well. So it's a comma separated values. Actually, this is a JSON return, a Java standard formatted file. And you've got the square brackets in there, and then some quotes, and then you've got that variable name that I asked for, B08301, comma, the next variable, the state and the county. And if you look at this, as from a GIS user's perspective, this is the header. This is your first data record. So this is the value for this field. And there's the value for that field. So this particular field, wow, state, county, this is, I'm sorry, I did the whole country. So this is Alabama, 01? 0001 County, Alabama, Togwa County maybe. So there were 24,349 people who commuted to work, and of those, 12 rode bicycles. And there's my state FIPS and my county FIPS codes. So if I want to merge them into my GIS, I can do that. Before I do it, however, I've got to manipulate this file somewhat. But if I were a programmer, I would just write a little snippet of code that says, when this comes back to me, strip off the brackets, do this, format it this way, slap it right into my GIS. Which, you know, if you gave me a little bit more time, I might be able to do it myself. You think it's that simple. So, if I were to change the data set, and I won't flog the horse too long here. So I'm changing to SF1 data, and I build the URL for it. Again, I have the path or the server location where I'm sending the request. I'm now going to the 2010 SF1 data. Here's my key, it's me. Here's my variable. I want total pop and total white loan for tracts in state 30, county 31. So you can see now how I'm requesting for a single county's worth of tract level data for these two variables. So unlike Factfinder and a lot of our other tools where it asks you lots of questions, what do you want, or what geography, this requires that you know up front the geography you want and the names of your variables. If you're going to do this a lot, or if you're building an app for somebody, which you might do, you're going to read all these variables in someplace and have them as a lookup table. You're going to know some of the rules, like you can't search for SF data in the ACS folder, those kinds of things. It's really quite simple. Once you build that string, you send it to the server takes a few seconds, and dumps the data right back at you. And if your software on the end is ready for it, you can load it straight into a map immediately and never have to do a download of all. So, where were we here? Hopefully close to being done. I guess I wasn't that far along, was I? All right. Yeah, it was pretty close to being done. So, I believe this is the way things are going to work for GIS users in the future. I mentioned it before. When I first started playing around with it, I saw a lot of potential there. And again, not being a programmer, I played around with it enough to see, boy, this could do quite a bit. I think we're going to start to see this more and more, where your application will ask the API for information, the API will send it to the application, and you'll never have to know what happened in the background. So custom applications in the future, I'm really looking forward to the day when someone writes a Python script so that in ArcGIS I can just put my variables in, it goes and grabs them and brings them back to the geography I want. And that's really all I had to talk about today. It was a fairly focused subject and not a lot of nitty-gritty. But are there any questions or comments? Thank you. Good. Thank you very much.
This kind of works. So if you press this, it works some, and then forward and back. Okay, so our last speaker is Allison, and she works here for the Department of Commerce, and she is a planner. Is that what you
Yes, I am.
So she's going to be talking on that. She is also the one that has helped us a lot with getting the credits for planners and getting kind of that sign-up sheet set up and everything. So I will let her go, and she should go till about 12, and then we'll wrap things up and say goodbye to you guys.
Hey. Good morning. A few familiar places. Sorry, I'm feeling only at about 80% this morning, so if I fall over, as Leslie said, I am a professional planner. I work in the Community Development Division within Commerce, and I'm the Planning Bureau Chief for that division. So my role as Planning Bureau Chief, wear a lot of different hats, but one of those hats is to manage the Community Technical Assistance Program, which some of you may be aware of, commonly referenced as CTAP. So I'll be talking a little bit about the resources we have at CTAP in relation to the overall resources that planners use with GIS. So today, one of the things I kind of wanted to focus on was to first talk about planning and its relationship with geographic information systems, how GIS is utilized, how it can be utilized, just to get a sense, since I don't know the majority of you in here, how many of you are planners? Okay. 1.5. Okay.
planning on going to lunch.
Okay, there's a lot of similarities. So, and the rest of you, how many work for the state government? Okay, what department? Vital staff. Vital staff, okay. Okay. Okay.
Revenue.
Great.
Trust labs.
Okay. Great. And local government? I know where you work, Laura. So, you know, planning in the state of Montana often, I don't want to say it's a bad rap, but when people say, what do you do? And I respond, well, I'm a planner. They often say, oh, what do you plan for? Do you plan parties? The people that do know about the profession understand to a certain degree, but oftentimes relate planning to subdivision review, which is one of the many facets of planning in the state, but it's certainly not the only facet of the profession. And as a planner, there are various different levels within the planning field and focuses. Not every planner knows GIS. Not every planner utilizes GIS. The training and experience I've had did require that I learn and utilize GIS. But one of the things I'd like to cover today and maybe introduce you all to is the overlap between the planning profession and GIS professionals, the use of data, how we utilize it, take it, convey it to the constituents that we serve at various levels of local, state, federal government, and how that may, in some ways, overlap with some of the roles that you have in state and local government. So it might be pretty high level. It might be fairly basic for those of you who have a general understanding of GIS. How many use ArcView software? Okay, great. So looking through the agenda, a lot of the information that you've probably heard about over these last few days, you're already well versed and familiar with a lot of the resources in the program. So in that way, this might just be a general overview. But what my focus is going to be is how we as planners use this program to inform the work that we do and how that relates. So first I wanted to basically just provide an overview of the planning profession. Planning as defined by the American Planning Association, otherwise known as APA, is really geared at improving the welfare of people's lives. It's not just subdivision review, but it's focused towards planning at the local or the state or often the regional or federal level, planning for a vision of what communities and constituents want to see in their communities, within the region, within certain aspects or facets of their community. So it might be focused towards transportation or health or growth and development. But planners generally work on some level with local governments. Even if you're in the private sector, a lot of planners do work in private development. And even with that focus, they still interact on a daily basis or frequently with local governments because there's a series of processes that even private planning staff have to go through in order to follow local guidelines and implement their visions and their development plans. So oftentimes planners work with elected officials as well as community members. They're civic-minded, and you'll notice the words that I've sort of highlighted and underlined are kind of the key components of high level what the planning profession conveys. So you'll see in a minute where at least I think the overlap between planning and GIS occurs. GIS obviously is a system of providing information. It's hardware, software, and data for manipulating, capturing, visioning, analyzing, and managing that data. And so in a lot of ways, geographic information systems provide the basic tools for planners to work with in accomplishing their goals and developing visions for their communities and their constituents. But what I really want to highlight is that from a planning perspective, GIS is the tool that helps us visualize a lot of the key concepts. And when we're talking about policy, making policy and determining steps forward, GIS can really be sort of the visual tool to take that text and make it, communicate it better with the communities and the constituents that we work with. So, gosh, for a second that looked clean. So the intersection between the planning field and the GIS field is really the bones and then the procedure and the processes that planners enact. And obviously, most of you in this room are well aware of the types of data available in GIS. The probably number one source of data that we use is related to population. Population statistics are sort of the very basic building blocks for anything planning related. Who you're planning for, how they're growing, if they're growing, where they're growing, why, kind of informs all of the other discussions and decisions that we make. But there's also various forms of data related to public services, response times, utilities, types of housing, types of businesses, the demographics of the population, obviously land use, transportation, accessibility, environment. And that data is in turn conveyed through planning efforts and documents. In this state, primarily through the growth policy. And I'm going to talk a little bit and show you some examples of how we work with this data through the growth policy. But in addition to, I guess, let me back up. Does everybody know, are you familiar with the growth policy? You don't have to answer, Laura. The statutory requirement in state law. Do you know what a growth policy is? Okay. Growth policies in Montana are sort of seen as the penultimate planning tool. They're a requirement of local governments, cities and counties, if those local governments would like to implement certain regulatory measures like zoning, they have to have a growth policy in place. Beyond that, they're not technically required, but most cities and counties throughout the state do have a growth policy or development plan in place to guide basic growth decisions that are made at the local level. It sets you up for a variety of things. It was the growth policy statute, which was, I won't get into that, but basically growth policies are a really positive planning tool because they, again, set the vision and they establish for policymakers how those jurisdictions are going to grow moving forward. So they're sort of the base map, or I should say they serve as the umbrella, underneath which you get your regulations, zoning I mentioned, subdivision regulations are related to the growth policy. You have annexation policies for your city, where you're going to annex and why, and the services you're going to provide. That should be based on the growth policy, again, because it's informing those decisions. Growth policies often have sub-plans and studies at the regional scale because our counties here in Montana are quite large, and so growth policy for Flathead or for Yellowstone County encompasses a much larger area, in some cases the size of Rhode Island, and requires some sub-planning. They can also form the basis for transportation plans, for capital improvement plans, and also inform kind of the nitty-gritty if a city or a county has design standards that they prefer local governments to follow. This is going to be really hard to see now that I'm seeing the side of the screen. So, and will these all be online?
Yeah, we'll put them on the website so you guys can
this is actually, it's a really informative table, and it sort of illustrates the ways in which data can be used through these different types of planning tools at the local level. So I'll just take a couple examples here. Data related to transportation. The three categories across the top, there's the application of simple inventory, then there's the analysis aspect of the data, and then the final decision-making or the policy-making application. So taking transportation on its face, you can use data to visualize or convey sanitation truck routes. You can pinpoint locations of landfills. You know, at the very basic level, that data can help you visualize what exists on the ground. From there, you can go through an analysis of the existing and potential capacity and the strains due to potential growth and development. So you can take the existing landfills, you can look at their capacity, you can look at the routes and the staff required to man those routes, and utilizing different data, will complete an analysis to kind of determine where the highest need is related to growth. If this landfill is at much higher capacity or close to capacity, perhaps in approving additional growth in that area or that region might not be the best idea unless in turn you're planning to expand that resource or expand additional transportation routes. And so that in turn affects the policy decisions that may be conveyed through your growth policy or your capital improvement planning document, where the local government would say, you know, for this area, we're almost at capacity for this landfill. We don't have the funding to expand that within the next 5 or 10 years. So growth should be directed towards this area of the city instead, where the capacity of the landfill is maybe only 50%, and we're better able to provide the services. So there's a number of other examples: housing stock, human services, law enforcement can provide an inventory of police stations, availability of officers. You can analyze the frequency of crime and look at crime rates in relation to the number of officers that may be available in a particular area and make policy decisions on that. So through the planning process, we tend to take the data that's available, go through that analysis, and in turn come up with policies that the local government then decides what will best suit the needs of the community based on their priorities and vision. So, as I mentioned earlier, statute doesn't require that every city and county adopt a growth policy, but if they choose to, there are certain requirements that the growth policy addresses. And so, under statute, communities that adopt a growth policy must address, through maps and text, existing conditions. And those existing conditions are typically population, housing, the economic base, transportation, sand and gravel resources, the environment. You have to address all of those. To what extent is up to the local governing body. But it does specifically require maps and text. Now, over the years, most communities tend to focus more on the text as the basis for the growth policy development. It's really easy to throw data up in a table, to talk about it throughout basically a report, and your policies are developed, and obviously they're text. But what's important and what we're trying to move communities towards is taking the text and illustrating the data that's implied to the maps, because maps are a quicker and easier way to show communities what the policies that they're deciding upon are actually going to do and how they're going to impact the local level. So very basically, we know this would be an example of data inventory in a growth policy that's being developed for Stanford. Actually, right now, they took and looked at what the existing land use is. So this would be an example of, based on the county data and the information available at the state level, what the parcel data for the city of Stanford land uses based on tax value are presently in Stanford. So this is just an example of an illustrative map inventorying land use. But when we move into the nuts and bolts of a growth policy, you have goals and policies. This one is an example from the Flathead County Growth Policy, which I worked on before coming to the state. And you'll see that when you read at face value, this goal is to support land use policies ensuring adequate quality and quantity of sand and gravel to meet the current and future demands in Flathead County. If that's your goal, what does that actually mean? And if you're the average citizen, you're going to read that and say, wow, that's all well and good, but I don't really know how that affects me, and I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing, and I couldn't even begin to tell you the first thing about whether we have adequate quality and quantity of sand and gravel resources. So what the map does in this situation is illustrate the existing locations of gravel resources in Flathead County currently. It also illustrates the types of superficial soils with using data from the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, and it overlays the water resources because certain soil types are more prevalent, have more prevalent sand and gravel resources. And as you can kind of see from the small map up here, a lot of the sand and gravel resources in Flathead County are concentrated in more of the soils that are closest to the Flathead River and kind of in the floodplain. And so being able to illustrate through mapping and through the data what the goal and what the intent of the growth policy really is helpful to convey information to people that might not automatically understand what those resources are, where they're located, and how they relate to different resources like soils and hydrology. Madison County has a fantastic growth policy that was just updated in 2012, and they completed a number of maps that are pretty phenomenal sources of data. So I'm going to go through two objectives that they have within their growth policy. It's actually two objectives within the same statement. One is to locate development in areas that are physically suitable for development. And what does that mean at face value in text? It can mean a lot of things. So what they did is illustrate suitability based on a number of factors, one of which was looking at their wildland-urban interface. And this basically conveys where certain development types or any development would be less preferable based on the likelihood that there might be environmental concerns, wildfires. You're getting into the wildland interface where you have additional concerns with wildlife and environmental restrictions. So this was layered with a number of other factors, including what we'll see next, which deals more with access, but is also suitability for the type of development. So when we want to locate development in areas that are easily accessed by public services, we can better illustrate that through an analysis that looks at response time as well as distance from services and road maintenance. So in this map, what they're showing are the roads in green highlighted are actually not maintained by the county during the winter. So when you're going to have limited access for a pretty large portion of the year, it might make you think twice about locating a large development or directing development in those areas because you're going to have very restricted accessibility. Additionally, ArcGIS can complete an analysis for response times and response rates. Again, if you have a fire and your house is burning down, a 45-minute response time is probably not going to be acceptable as far as, but a lot of counties, Flathead and Madison included, they use this data not only to determine their policies, but also just to make citizens aware. For many counties in Montana, they don't restrict growth through zoning or land use control. And so in a lot of ways, the level of risk a homeowner or property owner is willing to take on is their own decision. So it's important through the growth policy document to provide community members with the information to make those decisions. They might still choose to locate further away from services and recognize that the response time is going to be reduced. But they have been given the tools and the information to make that decision, and the county in turn can make policy decisions that limit the cost in providing the services. Billings, I'm going to move on to a different example out of growth policies into some of the sub-planning efforts. So the city of Billings has a great annexation policy. It was recently adopted? We're in the process right now to update it. Okay. And with the annexation policy, a requirement in statute is that there's a provision of services plan that goes with that annexation policy. And a lot of those plans tend to be all tax-based. But what Billings does is actually have a plan that looks like this, that shows the limits of annexation. And I don't think this is the one that's in process right now. No, the old one. Yeah. Okay. And so this visual is showing the prioritization that the city of Billings has in annexing property over the next short term, 2 years, and then the long term, whichever week, 10 years. So the areas in red are the short-term priorities. Individuals who choose or request to be annexed in those areas would be considered. We would have services to be able to do that quickly, as opposed to the orange areas, which are further away from those services and would require much longer-term planning and additional costs to the city. So similarly, because in a lot of ways zoning and annexation go hand in hand, particularly when we're talking about municipalities and municipal planning. The city of Kalispell, within their growth policy, has a policy that's intended to encourage urban growth in areas which are not environmentally sensitive or productive agricultural lands. Well, that policy is really hard to convey, again, without a visual aid to show what those areas are that are environmentally sensitive and what type of urban growth we want to keep away from those areas. So this map, which is actually their zoning and floodplain map, which is based on that policy, shows the existing floodplain in blue, 100-year, and the grayish is 500-year. And you can see from the map that the higher density zoning areas, which are these pinks and peaches, are kept outside and away from the floodplain and generally more towards the urban core. The lower density residential uses, you'll see some of the yellow that abuts that 500-year floodplain, but generally those densities are 1 resident per acre and would be assumed to have developable area outside the floodplain on the property. So beyond just the physical documents and beyond the planning processes themselves, there's other opportunities for data and for GIS to be utilized through public workshops and meetings, trainings, and design charrettes primarily, the public forum is a good place to utilize not only these visual mapping documents, but also a couple of tools that I'm going to talk about here. Unfortunately, we didn't have time enough today to really go through a community viz example, and as I was putting this together, realized that I have to update my community viz license on my computer, so it would have been a moot point anyway. But and I know Ken knows about community viz in the back. Ken trained me in it about 6 years ago. But is anyone else familiar with community viz as a tool? Someone? Right. So what community viz does generally is provide provides a wide range of tools and services that planners and GIS professionals can use to conduct really in-depth analysis. But what I found it most useful for in my line of work is completing relatively basic analyses in the public forum to walk communities through certain decisions that may or may not be made and what the implications are. So at the very basic level, what community does is it's built off of the ArcView platform. It's almost like an add-on. You're going to see a very similar desktop that you would if you opened up ArcMap or ArcViewer. And the data that you're going to import will be similar, but what Community Viz allows you to do is make some assumptions for that data. For instance, in this case, I think it will allow us to explore here. And this is, when I go back to the presentation, and you'll have this online, so you can connect directly to the Placeways website and look at these examples and run through them interactively as well. But what this example is looking at is a community, and it's assessing the development build-out using certain assumptions, which are fuel efficiency, the number of trips per household per day, the number of school children, and a general overview of the time lapse, essentially. And Community Viz as a program allows you to input these assumptions to be specific to your community and then change the importance of the assumptions as well as the numeric value of the assumptions. So this example is looking primarily at the numeric value of the assumptions, but in examples I've used in the past, I've utilized more the importance of certain data. For instance, if you're hoping to direct specific development towards areas of your community that, using Madison County as an example, that have less than 15-minute response time for fire and law enforcement, that are close to an elementary school, let's say within a mile, that are within 5 miles of a high school, and that are within 5 minutes of a grocery store. You can build all of those assumptions into the Community Viz model. And what that model will then do is spit out a map that shows and prioritizes by parcel or whatever shapefile layer you select. It'll prioritize those locations. So the community can get a sense of, well, what if our preferences change? What if we want a 5-minute response rate from the fire and emergency services? Well, we're okay with being 5 miles from an elementary school. You can change those assumptions interactively with these slide bars, and the output will change almost automatically within that public forum. So what I found this really helpful for is within those community meetings and workshops where you're sitting down with folks and having those discussions to determine their priorities, particularly in the growth policy or the capital improvement planning process.
It's a pretty slick tool. It's also like ArcView software. It's very easy to forget how to use if you don't use it on a daily basis. But Placeways, when you visit the website, they have a number of different statewide and regional training opportunities. They have a number of different examples. Another cool option that you have through the software is to actually create 3D models and do fly-throughs, which again is a very good tool for a visioning process with a community to help them understand what a certain scenario or what a certain build-out would look like. So I haven't done this myself, but I know a couple communities that have utilized this to develop design standards for their downtown business district or their downtown core. And you can input data from Google Earth, SketchUp, number of different programs, I believe AutoCAD as well, so you can mesh those programs together and input certain design characteristics through SketchUp or AutoCAD and say, well, what if we did design standards that limited building height along these streets to 3 stories? Or what if we did 5 stories? What's that scale going to look like? What are certain design facets going to look like? And obviously helps communities get a sense of what decisions they're making when they write that into their code, into their policy. Another tool that I have just learned about within this past year, and so I really think this is going to be useful moving forward, and I'm not sure, Leslie, if anybody's talked about the ArcGIS for local government over the course of the last couple of days. So what this is basically a free, there's a series of free applications that if you have ArcGIS software, you can download as a professional and use through ArcView desktop. But it also has an online function for municipalities that, it's easier for me to explain through. Let me just show you. Dependent on what types of data have been uploaded online, and so this is a question that might come up with the online mapping data and resources for the state of Montana. But here we go. Okay. So what communities or what the state, for instance, could do with the data that's available is upload it, becomes part of the cloud, if you will, and it's accessible by local governments and people who might not have access to ArcView, to the desktop version, similar to the online mapping tool through GIS. And it's a way to share information for local governments and the public. This example is for Naperville, Illinois, and it's showing the current construction project specific to the community. So you can, if I'm a citizen and I am interested in knowing what the racket is down the street, I can go onto this web service and say, well, you know, this giant orange blob is a sidewalk rehabilitation project for this entire area. And it's able to more easily and efficiently share information for communities. One of the other examples that I found really interesting when I was first introduced to this software, you have a park and recreation finder. So here again, if maybe you're a homeowner or you're looking at selling or buying a new house, you can go into the Park and Recreation Finder and actually search by address or location or an area,
and find out the number of parks and recreation opportunities within a certain distance to you. You can also they have an addressing application, so if there are any changes to addressing that occur, citizens can go in and make sure their information is accurate so that local emergency services have the most up-to-date information to provide services and to access the property. And there was one more here. We've got polling places. I believe it was this tool. This is really a neat feature similar to the public information. No, this isn't going to do it. But there's one tool that allows local governments to provide information on public hearings, for instance, for subdivision or zoning or land use application requests that come into a city or a county. That geographic information can be placed online, and citizens interested in finding out information on a subdivision proposal, when the public meeting is, provide public comment online if they're unable to attend the public meeting, and it can all be recorded and provided to the local government through an output feature. So it's kind of the next wave, which here in Montana we tend to be about 40 years behind everybody else when it comes to land use planning. So we'll talk again in 39 years and see if any local governments are using this. But it really is a resource that I think larger communities are beginning to use, certainly along the East Coast, Midwest, and Illinois, and Ohio, where I grew up. It's a resource that I think is going to make a very big difference. So how many of you were in the online mapping workshop yesterday morning? Okay. So just for those of you who were in that workshop, you already know this, but our GIS is moving to an online platform that allows a lot of different mapping capabilities similar to what you would have with the desktop ArcSeed software to be available online, again, for people who don't want to pay for the very expensive license for a desktop mapping software. So this is the web location. There is eventually a cost to this software. You get a 30-day free trial to manipulate data. And after that, there's a cost of, I believe it's $2,500 for 5 seats. And
yeah, 2,500 credits. So
yeah,
it varies on how much you're going to use it, how many people.
Right. And yeah.
Just a question.
Yeah.
So the 2,500, that covers ArcView, a full ArcView plus? No.
No,
No.
just online.
Just online.
And ArcView would be separate and more.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I know. I'd say it's a racket, but
So is Word.
right, exactly. It's the same. We're all in the same racket together, and in a lot of ways, this is more useful information than Word. So, but you are able to access and view maps without paying for the license that are pre-made and the existing data. So there's a certain level of functionality that's available even if you don't have, if you haven't paid the $2,500 to use further manipulate. Obviously, you've all been sitting in this room for the last day and a half, and so you heard about the new Census and Economic Information Center's website, all of the changes, the tools that are available to you on that. Is one of what I'm kind of highlighting. Obviously, there's about 1 million different resources and locations to find data on the interweb these days. But these are kind of the tools and the locations that I go to most often. Obviously, being a state employee and having CESD right downstairs, the resources that they have are accessible. They're accessible and they're extensive. They have access to ACS data, the data sets for the population projections, which Joe talked to you about yesterday, I believe, that are fantastic. They have a variety of maps readily made. They also have the interoperability with being able to manipulate and kind of make your own maps as well. The economic dashboard, a variety of reports, existing presentations that they've done, webinars that are always available, including this one, I believe. Yes. And then the technical support. So you can always call Leslie. Or Joe. Or Mary. If you have questions or need assistance making a map, they're able to do that, which is really fantastic for a lot of the communities throughout the state that don't have access to ArcGIS software or need a particular map for a particular reason. The state library has the new geographic spatial data infrastructure website. Obviously, how many of you are familiar with CAMA data? Yeah. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with what's out there in CAMA, the state's website basically provides a portal to a lot of different information sources, NRIS, USGS, soils data, water, hydrology. All the data can be searched for, and then there's the GIS portal that will get you to other resources. What's there to say? No, see my internet skills. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with this site, this is a pretty cool tool that utilizes the data that's available throughout the state, specifically related to property. So I'll just show you real quick how you can search for property information. This is the house I just bought. Very exciting. But it provides a ton of information on parcel data as well as other resources, tax assessment information, market info. So it's really kind of the go-to data source I found for a lot of mapping capabilities when you're talking about parcel data. All of the CAMA data can be merged with parcel layers available to the state for your particular city or county, so you can get all of this information on a parcel for your respective community, city, town, county, and merge the data to be more informative. That's what I use it for as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's useful for all sorts of things. Find out who your neighbors are. One thing I will point out, because in sitting through the workshop yesterday and learning about all the new functionalities with the online GIS resources, the Montana State Library has resources available to communities that need technical assistance to utilize some of those online data resources. I, for one, know there are probably more than a handful of communities out there that don't realize the tools are available to them, and even if they did, would probably have a really hard time navigating a lot of the functionalities in that online GIS, because it takes a lot of the same knowledge of desktop GIS or ArcView software to kind of navigate and change and manipulate the data. So Erin Fashway told me that I could put her email address up on this presentation. She's a programmer and analyst over at the State Library, and was certainly willing to provide technical assistance over the phone, and I believe they do workshop trainings as well if requested for local governments. And
I do like David requested to you guys. Aaron and I work a lot together with the same kind of helping people.
Right, right. CTAP, our program, we have mapping capabilities, obviously. The data requests and the information requests or technical assistance with operability of ArcView software, I would likely send you to Leslie or to Aaron for assistance because they're the pros and I just kind of work my way through things. But we can create maps for you. Similar to CEIC, we also have a large format plotter and do a lot of plotting of maps for communities that don't have those resources but need them for public meetings or integrated into growth policy documents and that sort of thing. And all of CTAP's assistance is free to the public upon request. So it can be utilized for those types of projects. The other thing is we have community visit capabilities, and once I renew my license. So from an analysis standpoint and to do some of those prioritization kind of walkthroughs where communities are interested in that, we have the capacity to do so. And I won't belabor the point. Obviously, you all have heard of and are probably very familiar with the American Community Survey and census information available for the state through CEIC, but then if we're going beyond the state of Montana for any particular reason, the ACS website is sometimes user-friendly. But it does allow, it has a number of search functions and the ability to download just a ton of data and shape files for you to use in, well, for planners to use in their daily work and you as well. So that's sort of my overview. I apologize for only being at 80% today. But if you have any questions or want some additional information, again, CTAP's always available to help, and I certainly hope you can reference the PowerPoint and some of the links and the resources available to you over time.
Good question.
Yeah.
You're at the state level for planning.
Yeah.
I'm over Planning County, used to be, but they have their planning department. So how do you coordinate with other counties' planning departments, or are you there for the counties that don't have those resources?
We're there for both. Typically, the larger communities like, Flathead County, it has a pretty large planning department, respectively. Missoula's and Bozeman's and Billings generally have the resources available and we don't see the need or the request for assistance as much as we do from some of the more rural communities that don't have the technical expertise or the staff to assist. But primarily what CTAP is for is to provide guidance and assistance, not necessarily to do the work. For instance, I can walk people through what a growth policy is, what it should encompass, review existing documents, but I can't actually prepare a growth policy or subdivision regulation or zoning code or review subdivision, that type of thing for communities. So there's another question I thought. Yeah.
I just had a clarification on the question on pictures of mine.
Yeah.
With 10.2, all named users got a free account, one account.
Okay.
So if you buy a subscription, it's a 5-speed account, 2,500, but you're probably smarter. If you have an ELA and a company like the agreement, which both the state does, most large counties do, it's bundled with that if you want your email. But we got ours as 5-speed first. So we have, I think, 2 named users on
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to just stop our recording.